Steelers fans, we hope you enjoyed the bye week because we're breaking more things down right here on Locked On Steelers. I'm going to be looking at how they simplify the offense and how it actually could get some more big plays involved for Kenny Pickett. That and much more right in today's episode. I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button of the video if you enjoy it. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content whenever we can release them. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On at prizepicks.com. All right, y'all. So, bye week's over. You didn't watch the Steelers lose, so you had a happy Sunday. But let's talk about what they got to do to get back in the win column. They got the Saints coming up this weekend. The Saints play tonight, Monday night, against the Ravens. We'll see how they play. It'll be a chance for, kind of some like fan scouting there to be able to watch that. But I'm gonna take a step back and talk about some of the things that I was just looking at over the weekend, because whereas I was covering Pitt beating Syracuse this weekend and I was doing other things, I took some time to just go over film, just watch some of the older games. And I've been specifically watching just Kenny Pickett and how he was taking in plays and looking at the all 22 and the progressions. And you've heard my talks about these things. I've been critical when it's time to be critical. I've been saying, hey, this doesn't doom him to future failure for the rest of his career, say he's a bad pick or anything like that. But hey, these are bad decisions. I've also said he can grow from them. And I've also said that he's grown from them from his time when he was at Pitt. But make no mistake, even though everyone's excited about TJ Watt coming back, and I've talked about how they could go on a run to make this an interesting chase in the AFC North down the stretch in this year, the biggest objective I think the Steelers have to make come to reality this year, the biggest objective they must achieve, is Kenny Pickett's progression. And he doesn't have to become a superstar quarterback this year, but he has to show progress. He has to show the ability to get to read defenses, take what's there, and move forward with it. And if the Steelers miss on that, this year is going to seem like if Kenny Pickett doesn't show any progression this year, and then next year he looks like a dud, then it's going to be like, this is bad, and it's going to set back this rebuild even further than it already is. That's why it's that much importance to me as far as what the Steelers are doing right now. And I know one of the biggest takes coming out of last week with the trade deadline, I know a lot of Steelers fans, they liked the trade, but they said, but losing Chase Claypool, that's going to hurt the offense because you're losing a playmaker. And traditionally, you'd think that. But here was what I was thinking when I was looking more and more at Kenny Pickett's mistakes. I felt like he was trying to do too much or trying to make too many reads at times and then not taking the simple reads that were there. And the result of that is, or the cause of that might have been, because he knows the Steelers have a lot of different playmakers and he's trying to get all of them the ball. He's trying to distribute, which is ultimately you want to get to that point, right? Like, the best days, the best days when I was evaluating Ben Roethlisberger was when he would hit you with Antonio Brown and then Juju Smith-Schuster and then Martavis Bryant and then this guy and then that guy. And then you just didn't know where he was going because you couldn't just guard one guy. But it took years for Ben Roethlisberger to get to that point. It's the same thing with Josh Allen. It's the same thing with Patrick Mahomes. They didn't start out that way. Although you could say that Patrick Mahomes kind of did because he sat for a while and just lit the world on fire. But Josh Allen's a better example. He didn't start out being able to go between all his reads and run and do this and do that. It took him time to get there. And that's what they're trying to get Kenny to do. But one of the biggest ways and easiest ways is to simplify the offense. And I talked about this last week when I was playing clips of Matt Canada right here on this show, talking about how we got to get the simple things done. Well, without Chase Claypool, here's where I think you actually do simplify the offense a bit here. For example, I was talking about how on there was one big play in the red zone where Kenny Pickett had Steven Sims striking down the middle part of the field. He was wide open. He didn't see him. There was another play where Diontae Johnson ran a shallow cross and was wide open. And if he just throws a quick pass to him underneath, no pressure, he catches it. There's no one in front of him, and he can take off down the sideline, and it's probably a big play for the Steelers. I think he misses those plays because he's too worried about, oh man, we got to get to, Gunnar Olszewski on this play, or we got to get to Derek Watt, or we got to get to Zach Gentry. I think there's too many things he's trying to focus on. When he's doing that, he's missing the reads that are right there in front of him. And so this isn't necessarily just schemes as far as route concepts and things that, I think that some fans find more tangible because they play Madden and they think, oh, well, these schemes are these going to get open. I think what it comes down to, and it sort of dips into what I've been saying, I think is the biggest problem with this offense. It's not the play calls. It's Matt Canada's, the offensive coordinator, connecting with Kenny Pickett and this offense behind the scenes to turn what they're studying in the classroom onto on-field production. And I think part of that is simplifying it for Kenny. Look, Kenny, your job on most given plays is to read this guy, Diontae Johnson, and this guy, George Pickens. And if all else fails, your safety valves are either Pat Freiermuth or Najee Harris. And that's it. And of course, there's exceptions. I'm not saying every play is going to be that. You're going to have your plays where Miles Boykin is probably going to have to be in. Guys are going to get injured. I'm not saying that it's just purely that. But designing the rest of the offense or forming the rest of the offense for the rest of the season, just to say, hey, Kenny Pickett, get these guys the ball. They're your playmakers. I think that's an easy way to get things started. And again, I said this a little bit last year. I compared this year's 2-6 team Steelers to the 2013 2-6 Steelers. And yes, they're different teams because Ben Roethlisberger was in his prime and that was his chance to kind of grow from there. But Ben Roethlisberger was in a new offense under Todd Haley. He wasn't clicking. It wasn't working. And the thing that got him going in that new offense was Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and finding a way just to get the ball to them however he could. And then everything else started to fall into place. Now, again, Kenny ain't prime Ben Roethlisberger right now. Maybe someday he gets to the point where he's his own player and he's making big plays like that. But right now, the easiest way I think you can is, on a play like, for example, that shallow cross where Diontae Johnson I talked about against the Eagles, broke across the field. The Eagles didn't even run with him. Kenny Pickett was staring down other guys and worrying about these other packages. Kenny, your job is to say, hey, these two guys are running these routes on these plays. If they take away one, go to the other. And if they take away both, then you go to your safety valve and work from that. But I think what's happened with Matt Canada's offense, and again, this is not me excusing Matt Canada, but this is me saying where I think is the problem here. I think the problem is that he designs plays for multiple guys to have a chance to get open, and there's always a primary read, but it's tough for Kenny Pickett as a rookie with the pace of the game, with trying to put the team on his back, and this offense not having an identity. I think that he's having a hard time picking through the forest of all those different plays when there could be multiple guys open, where instead of designing plays where 4 or 5 guys could get open, you're designing plays where 1 or 2 guys are getting open. And I think it's, again, you're dialing back the complexity to maybe get something to spark. And it doesn't have to stay at this way forever. It's just to get him started, just so he can start to see things, because quarterbacks, you can go on hot streaks, and we've seen this. And when something clicks, when some success clicks, it builds chemistry, it builds rhythm, not just with quarterbacks, but with the rest of the offense. And that might be the key to getting this offense just some success. Because right now they're dead, they're next to last in the NFL. The Colts took the bottom of the spot over the weekend. But I have some more points about this in relation to the rest of the league, both on how their defenses have played the Steelers and how other quarterbacks have played, and why I think it's actually very relevant to how the Steelers are using Kenny Pickett right now. We'll talk about that in a lot more in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys more about our friends over at Prize Picks. Now, as I've told you guys before, Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All you're doing with Prize Picks is you're picking 2 to 5 players that you think you have a beat on in their fantasy production in that game. And you just choose whether they'll get more or less than the numbers that Prize Picks has projected them to have. This is a lot easier than regular daily fantasy, because in most daily fantasy games, you're competing in a pool of thousands of people, and you have to basically hit the lottery to win money. You're not hitting the lottery with Prize Picks. You're just saying more or less on every player that you pick, and you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry while playing with Prize Picks. And you're not competing against others. You're just competing against the house. And this isn't just the NFL. You've got the NBA, you've got NHL, Major League Baseball is over, but you also got college sports. There's so many other options for Prize Picks on top of the NFL. But it's a fun thing to try out. So go download the Prize Picks app today, or go to prizepicks.com and you can sign up to play daily fantasy sports. And make sure, if you're a first-time user, use that promo code Locked On, and that's LOCKEDON, Locked On, because when you do that, you get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with that promo code Locked On. Again, that's LOCKEDON, Locked On, at prizepicks.com, or by downloading the Prize Picks app on your phone. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're continuing to talk about dialing back the offense a little bit to help Kenny Pickett. And again, it's not because he's not smart enough. It's just about getting a rookie going, getting something. Sometimes it's like, when they say you want to start with the easy pass to build a guy's rhythm. I think that's what we're talking about here. Now, I will also point out that when you look at, especially after this weekend's adjusted stats with the Sunday games, when you look at the defenses the Steelers have faced, they have faced 5 of the top 8 defenses scoring-wise in the NFL. They faced the Bills, who are number 1, the Eagles, who are number 4, the Buccaneers, who are number 5, the Patriots, who are number 7, and the Jets, who are number 8. And the Bengals are number 14. That's the next on the list. Those are some pretty well-playing defenses right now. And we also saw the Jets just take down the Bills. How about that? But again, when I talk about how I think this team could rebound in the second half of the season and have some opportunities, you look at some of their opponents, and their defenses are some of the ones that are struggling the most in the NFL. They have several games against some of the bottom 10 worst defenses in the league coming up. They've got the Panthers, who looked ugly against the Bengals this weekend. They've got the Raiders. Both of them rank in the bottom 5 of the NFL. They've got the Falcons. They've got the Browns again. And they've got the Ravens twice, and the Ravens don't look too good. We'll see how they look against the Saints. And the Saints themselves. The Saints are the 6th worst defense right now in the NFL. There are going to be some opportunities for this offense to maybe, go into a game, stumble, but not be up against a defense that knows how to put you away as soon as you make your first big mistake. And that's what they've gone against with some of these defenses, like the Bills, who are very talented across the board, like the Eagles, who have one of the best front fours, maybe the best front defensive line in the NFL right now. But maybe this is the chance for them to bounce back. And again, the Patriots and the Jets, 2 more teams in that mix, as well as the Buccaneers. All of those teams got talent. They've been drafting talent to build themselves on defense. And maybe this is the chance for the Steelers to kind of bounce back there. But even stepping away from the other team's defenses, I want to go look at the quarterbacks and the things that are happening here because across the NFL right now, because this is not the same NFL that I grew up watching all the time when it was just Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, just airing it out every single weekend, dicing everybody up, and just elite quarterback play from everybody out there. And, I think it's kind of catching up. The NFL is catching up with itself. Defenses adjust. And if you don't have those type of quarterbacks that just dice you up every week all throughout the NFL, and I think there's good quarterbacks for sure, But I mean, outside of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, I think there's definitely a drop off in the tier of quarterbacks in that those two guys, and we saw Patrick Mahomes pull it off even when the Titans were playing great defensive football against him. We saw him just pull it off where there's times where if you don't get him down, if you don't do everything in your power to stop him, he will find a way to beat you. And I don't think it's that way with all the other quarterbacks. And that's even with guys that I have a lot of respect for, like Jalen Hurts, who diced the Steelers up last week, like Lamar Jackson, who I think is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL because people keep saying, oh, he's a running back. And I'm like, y'all don't see everything that he does for the Ravens. Even like Kirk Cousins. But I think one thing all those guys do that's really well, they're just finding the open man. They're not having to be Tom Brady and hitting the 30, 40-yard pass in between double coverage and throwing the laser pass like Aaron Rodgers did or throwing up Hail Marys and being the home run hero. They're just taking what's there. They're operating their schemes well. Tua Tagovailoa is another perfect example. Tua's not not the best pure passer in the NFL, but what's helped him in the Dolphins is that he's understood what's being asked of him in his offense, and he knows where to go in certain points, and he's well coached to the point where he's had time to adjust in the NFL. And I think that Kenny Pickett's going to get there, and this is why I've said he needs time. But I think he's come to the understanding of, hey, when we run these plays and we see this, look, this is how I react. This is where I go. And he didn't always look like that. I think he's looked like that more this season because he's had more time to have trial and error, to learn from his mistakes and grow from it. And again, the whole idea of this is, when I'm saying find the open man is, you look at Tua's offensive production for the Dolphins. I actually think there's a lot of similarity for what the Steelers could be trying to do for Kenny Pickett and Tua Tagovailoa, as the Dolphins did for Tua Tagovailoa. Not that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are just sitting on the Steelers roster right now. But my point is, that offense really runs through those two guys. And then there's Mike Gesicki and other guys who just kind of happen to fill in. But George Pickens and Diontae Johnson, I think there's opportunities there. You need to get George Pickens more targets. You need to find a way to get to get him more opportunities. He's averaging just over 5 targets a game. You need to feed him more. ESPN Analytics was reported by 538.com for that Diontae Johnson is getting the most open of any NFL wide receiver. Prioritize getting those two guys the ball. It's kind of how the Dolphins offense runs. They prioritize getting Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle the ball. And this is not to say that those guys, that the Steelers receivers are those receivers that the Dolphins have. But I think it allows things to simplify and slow down for Tua, and that helps him be more efficient. I think that's what they need to do for Kenny Pickett. And again, this isn't about doing this for the rest of his life, but especially in these next few games where you're not facing the best defenses in the NFL anymore. This is about creating a spark. This is about getting a few big plays. Because when you get a few big plays, whether they're deep passes down the field or short passes that go for long plays, when you hit a few of those, then more start to come. And then you put defenses on their heels, and then they're looking for things that they're not used to, and then they're slowing down. And you do those a few times a game, well, more than a couple times a game, because the Steelers have hit on those like occasionally, but they don't hit them on them consistently enough. But if you notice, after when usually they hit on one that goes for 15, 20, 25 yards, you know what happens right after that? If the Steelers run the ball, they usually get good gains, whether it's Najee Harris or Jalen Warren, because the defense is on their heels. They're like, oh, man, we just gave a big play. What's coming next? And I think that this is the key. This is all ties down to how the Steelers pull out Kenny Pickett and get the best version of him in the second half of the season. Because when you hit on a couple big plays, and there's that spark that I'm talking about, and then opens up more to happen, then the run game's going to open up, because then Najee and Jalen Warren are going to get a chance to go. And then when you have the big plays working and the run game working, now you can call more play action, which is something that Mike Tomlin has said they want to do. They want to make this offense based in that. And then you actually have a balanced attack. And then you actually can keep defenses guessing. Nobody's guessing with the Steelers. Well, I mean, they are guessing, but they're guessing right most of the time, because they're like, listen, we're gonna take away Najee Harris, and we're gonna trust that you're not gonna be able to be efficient with the passing game. And if that's been your bet so far, that's what defenses have done, and they've been right. So the best way to activate that is find ways to simplify the offense for Kenny Pickett, get those reads down to focusing on Diontae Johnson because he's getting the most open in the NFL according to ESPN and 538 and the people that do that charting. And find a way to get the ball to George Pickens. You know what? Chase Claypool is gone, and there's a sense of like, dang, you wish you could have done more. But Chase Claypool was supposed to be a combat catch guy, and he just wasn't a combat catch guy. There were a couple times he did come down with, but not nearly enough. The percentage was way too low. And that's not to say he wasn't tough because, against the Eagles, he had that one play where he caught the ball and charged forward for some good yards to convert a 3rd and long. But you need him to be able to use his size. And there was a play for the Bears in his first game where he was interfered with. There was defensive pass interference and it wasn't called. But there was a play where he could have used his arms to pluck the ball out the air and they hit his hands and he didn't pull it in. And again, he was interfered with, and I don't think that means he sucks, but I do think that was a play where, like, man, you pull that in, the Bears fans lose their mind. I also think the Bears might win that game if he does that play. But again, when I'm looking at those type of moments, that's what George Pickens does. He's going up and getting the football, no matter who's hanging on him. Heck, the one play that I think Mike Tomlin should have challenged this past week was the one where he had the ball, brought it down, and after he hit the ground, was holding the ball in between his hands. James Bradbury punched it out after he was already down in bounds. I think George Pickens could be your jump ball guy, your 50-50 ball guy, your take the shot deep down the field guy, and then you can have Diontae Johnson be your cut him up, get loose, be shifty, be open, be that kind of guy. I think that's what you're looking at here if you're the Steelers. And then again, that doesn't eliminate Pat Freiermuth, but he's your Heath Miller. He's your safety valve. There were so many games where Ben Roethlisberger didn't look for Heath Miller all the time, but he worked his way back to him. And again, if you hit on some of those big plays to those top 2 receivers, teams can't stare down Pat Freiermuth. Teams can't put all the attention on him, and then you get some better matchups with him. And then again, if Pat Freiermuth's not the guy on the certain play, maybe it could be Najee Harris. But you have to find ways to simplify it down so that Kenny Pickett is faster in his reads, playing fast, playing loose, and being comfortable while also being confident and correct with his reads. We'll talk more about this as the week goes on because there's other perspectives I want to bring onto this show to talk about that. But we also got to talk defense in a little bit because TJ Watt's set to be back. We'll talk about that and other things the defense I think have to do this week leading into the Saints game. But first, we got to talk to you guys about our friends at betonline.net. BetOnline, your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments and league reviews and news, including this year's NFL season, NBA and NHL. With the World Series done, baseball is gone, but the other sports are not. So be able to put some money down and learn about where to put your money down by going to BetOnline, your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. Wrapping up the show here, I wanted to talk about a few things about the defense going into the week and what we're looking for. For one, TJ Watt is set to return. My colleague, Jerry Dulac, who's been covering the Steelers for a long time, he works at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, where I also work, and he's reported months ago when TJ when no one knew when TJ was coming back, he said, hey, bye week. That's when he's coming back. We'll see that he should be activated sometime this week, and that should be his time where he's good to go. But I think there's still the big question of the pass rush and how they can get back into a game. We've seen Alex Highsmith. He's definitely a good player, but he's not the catalyst of this defense. And he's not, I don't think he's a catalyst yet for a defense. I think maybe someday he gets there if he continues to sharpen his skills. But he had his chance while TJ Watt wasn't on the field to kind of show that he could carry the torch, and he just didn't. And that doesn't mean he's bad. It just means he's not, looking like a future Hall of Famer at this point in time, which again is totally fine for a 3rd round guy in his 3rd year. But you look at him, you look at Larry Ogunjobi, who just needs to be healthy. He's been hurt up a lot this season and dealing with injuries. And then you look at the fact that without Larry Ogunjobi, the Steelers really just have the same defensive line as last year. Cam Hayward, Chris Wormley, Tyson Olulu, who's hurt. Well, not hurt. Excuse me. He's also old. He was hurt last year. He's old now. And then you're hoping for Carlos Davis and other guys. DeMarvin Leal's hurt. They're in a rough spot, but they need Larry Ogunjobi to be healthy so that they can be a full together group. And they could get after the quarterback. Them and with TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, and of course Cam Hayward. And then you can still sprinkle in your Chris Wormleys after them, but you need that front four to be that tough and to be there consistently for the second half of the season. I was watching that Titans game, Titans Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, and the Titans, they almost had him. But there were so many times what saved the Titans and kept them alive was pressure from their front guys getting into the backfield, changing the launch spot for Patrick Mahomes, forcing him to move his feet, forcing him to throw awkwardly, and missing open guys that were open and finding space downfield. That's what the Steelers want to do with their pass rush, and that's what worked when the Steelers have been at their best in recent years. Is the pass rush either forces mistakes or protects the defensive secondary from their mistakes, and I think that's a big thing. That the Steelers, if they could get back TJ Watt and everyone starts feeding off him again, and it really does kickstart something special with this group, then maybe you're back to that. They traded for William Jackson III. William Jackson III ain't coming out here to intercept 7 passes in the next 8 games, but he's coming out here to bump and run and to stick with guys, to be physical, but also be accountable in the secondary and to make life harder so that receivers aren't just open all over the field. And then that way, if the pass rush does return, then some earlier throws are being made, and that gives the corners chances to make plays with the ball, or be able to predict a little bit better. But you got to have those options against some of those top offenses. Now, again, fortunately for the Steelers, they're not facing many of those top offenses. As much as I talked about how how they faced 5 of the top 8 offenses in the NFL. They've also faced some of the best, or 5 of the top 8 defenses in the NFL. They've also faced some of the top scoring offenses. And I'd say this is where it doesn't change just yet, because the Saints right now average 24.9 points. I believe that's 8th in the NFL. Yeah, it's 8th in the NFL right now. But they've faced the Eagles, who are the number 2 scoring team in the NFL. They faced the Bills, number 3 scoring team. They faced the Bengals, who are number 6. The Browns, who are number 7, and they're getting to ready to play the Saints. They've also played the Dolphins, who I believe are just outside the top 10. But again, they got some games coming up where I think they're going to be able to, kind of get on the good foot. They've still got the Colts coming up. They are the worst offense in the NFL, and that's looking like a terrible game when these two teams play each other. But I digress. They've got the Panthers coming up. Opportunities to set tones against these guys. But a lot of this starts with the pass rush returning and covering up for these guys. But also when the pass rush does return, because I'm fully confident that TJ Watt is going to be there. And if you want more insight on the TJ Watt stuff, I urge you to go to, after you finish watching this or listening to this, go check out the North Shore pod that I do for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I had a really good talk with Ray Fittipaldo, another beat writer on the Steelers that works at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and he's telling me, Ray's saying, hey, TJ is going to be 100%. This ain't going to be no like, oh, they're bringing him back and he'll be like, working his way back. Ray is saying that he'll be 100%. And if TJ Watt's actually 100%, look out. And then again, Alex Highsmith is starting to eat. And then that's allowing Cam Hayward and Larry Ogunjobi more opportunities to eat. And then with those guys producing and creating chaos in the backfield, that's going to give the secondary more chances to make plays on worse passes. It's all going to build off each other. That's what the Steelers have to hope for. But they need these guys to be healthy. Not just TJ Watt. They need Ogunjobi back. They need Highsmith to stay on the field. And they need to stop losing cornerbacks every week. Levi Wallace, Akella Witherspoon, whoever. They need these guys to be healthy. I think Cam Sutton's going to be a big part of this. I think that William Jackson III can be a big part of it. They need Mika and Terrell Edmonds to also be a big part of it. But I do see this defense drastically improving in the second half because I think they have some matchups that will favor them. I also think that with TJ Watt back, you see a lot more click in. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see if TJ Watt can come back, and he doesn't have to, set the NFL sack record or tie the NFL sack record again for a second year. But if he comes back and the defense just looks so much better, and then that kickstarts the Steelers climb back up in the standings, it's going to be like so undeniable how he is literally the most valuable player on the defense in the NFL. If he's able to do that by him, if his presence by himself makes this team that much better, you have to acknowledge that. But again, I think the plan for the defense right now, get him healthy. The team needs to be healthy, and they got to attack. They have to be aggressive again. They have to run fast, play fast, play at that level. I think they can. We'll see how they do it moving forward. Again, I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for checking out this show. If you want to find more of this show, we're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Like this video if you saw it on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily Monday through Friday content, as well as our bonus content. Thanks so much for checking us out again. Remember, you can rate us 5 stars with a positive comment on Apple Podcasts. You do both at the same time. I get you a special shout out at the end of the show. We'll be back Tuesday with more on your Pittsburgh Steelers, getting ready for Mike Tomlin, talking about things outside of the bye week. We'll see you then.